Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Friday, May 18th Administrator webinar. Thank you again for joining us today. If by any chance you've called in using your office phone, go ahead and mute your connection so that we don't have any background information or noise for the rest of the participants. We do have some documents that are available at the bottom of the page. If you haven't had a chance to look at those yet, we will have those up again at the end of our presentation today, as well as be referring to those throughout. But we want to just thank you again for joining us today. We do appreciate having you on the line and talking to you about educator evaluation and some of the intersection points with school leadership. My name is Joe Priest, and we are the Educator Evaluation Unit within the Office of Educator Excellence here at MDE. Part of our team here in the room with me today and sharing some of the presentation will be Brian Lloyd. He is our Education Research Consultant, really focusing on student growth for educator evaluations. Marty Snitchin's also on the call today. He is our Educator Supports Network Analyst. Michelle Imbernoni is an education consultant like myself, working with educator evaluations. Michelle's taken the lead on developing the content and typically leads these webinars, but she had some circumstances outside of her control that wouldn't allow her to be with us this morning, so she regrets not being with the group this morning, but she did develop some great content for us to share with you this morning. And Rebecca Emmerling is our unit manager, and she provides the vision and oversight for these projects. So we are the office here at MDE that focuses on educator evaluation. So we help to be your partners in that work. So as we present our content information now and towards the end of the webinar, please take note of that and feel free to contact us if we can help you with your efforts around educator evaluation. Really, our office is responsible for creating, implementing, and administering programs to develop and maintain Michigan's educator talent pipeline. We feel that these programs help ensure that Michigan educators have tools, training, and support to deliver effective instruction and leadership for Michigan students. We provide support to teachers and administrators, our local education agencies, PSAs, and ISDs throughout our state around a number of fundamental issues, and today we'll be focusing on the very important work of observation, feedback, and important conversations within educator evaluation. We're going to start you off with a quote here from Stephen Covey. I'd like you to take a moment to read that. As people enable themselves to achieve one or two goals for the year that are most meaningful, they will find power, peace of mind, and confidence in their abilities because they have achieved what they have set out to accomplish. Your commitments to achieving what matters most will become the foundation for tremendous accomplishments and contributions. You will become the change you seek to make. Please reflect on that statement about setting and achieving goals and how you can benefit from a shared sense of accomplishment from seeing others accomplish their goals. Please share your thoughts about the quote from Covey with your colleagues using the chat pod to the right. You can see that if several people are responding to the quote, please continue to work on your responses. We've found that the shared responses that are shared through the chat feature is one of the most powerful and meaningful parts of the webinar for the participants that are involved. So please continue to share your thoughts throughout and review the thoughts of your peers. We think that that's an excellent way to collaborate long distance and share some of our learning together. So I'm going to leave that quote up, and I'm going to talk about some more of our introduction information today. I do want to just reinforce to everyone that it is our honor to host you on the webinar and have administrators from throughout the state to take out of your time out of your day and engage in some work with us. We're very proud and excited to share some content with you to support your practices around educator evaluation to help as you work to grow the professionals that you're overseeing. We really want to encourage your participation during the webinar today. We'll have several of these chat pods and Q&As throughout. Additionally, after the webinar, we'll send you some follow-up information via email, including the presentation slide deck and a recording, as well as any notes from our question and answer session that occurs during the webinar. As a reminder, you are eligible for sketch credits for attending the webinar. You do need to attend at least 3 of the live webinars in the series and respond to the surveys that follow those webinars. After that conclusion of the series, we'll put all that information together, submit it to the MOAC system, and you'll receive the standard email from MOAC to complete the sketch process. And of course, we understand that the participants on today's webinar are probably working with different evaluation tools, so we don't get too specific with any of those frameworks. Instead, we provide guidance that will work well across all of those and really support your work regardless of the system that you're working on. Okay, looks like we got some good responses in here. It looks like there's a fair amount of agreement around the idea of as administrators that our success comes from the success of others, and it's through their goal setting and that shared sense of accomplishment that we really have a sense of a job well done and really a sense of accomplishment for our own work. So let's keep that in mind, not only how it affects our work, but how it also intersects with our teachers and how their goals for their students are ultimately what provides them their workplace satisfaction as well. We do provide these webinars to help drive our work around strategic goal number 3 of the top 10 in 10, which is all about developing a collaborative, prepared, and high quality education workforce. We do believe that educator evaluation is a key component and a key strategy to grow our professional educators, our teachers, and our administrators to help them connect with the professional development that's based on the needs that they have within their professional growth and allow us to provide high quality instruction and valuable leadership experiences to our staffs and to our students to move everyone forward. So we think educator evaluation is a key component to grow our professionals and retain high quality educators in our workforce. Today we'll be focusing on a few areas within educator evaluation. We're going to give you a quick update on some educator certification and how educator evaluation now is overlapping with certification. We're also going to talk about some of the important teacher and administrator perception data that has come from our educator evaluation research projects. And we're also going to dive into this idea of social emotional learning and cultural responsive teaching as a key element and strategy to support the whole child approach that we're driving in the state of Michigan, as well as to drive your improvement efforts. So here's our quick update on educator certification. Educator effectiveness ratings, the end of the year summative ratings for teachers and administrators, especially for teachers in this setting, are required for progression from the standard to professional certificate beginning with July 1st of this year. Educators seeking renewal after that point are required to have 3 consecutive effective or highly effective ratings in order to move to the professional certificate. And you could see at the bottom of the slide there for the advanced professional certificate, 3 of those 5 would need to be in the highly effective. Now, if those ratings come in non-consecutive years, another option to move to that professional certification would be to receive a letter of recommendation from the chief school administrator or superintendent overseeing that district. But we just want to provide this information so everyone's up to speed and knows that effectiveness ratings now have an outcome or a connection to the certification process. We're going to dive into the world of social emotional learning and cultural responsive teaching and how we can leverage those to improve your schools.
Thanks, Joe. Welcome everybody to the webinar this morning. This is Brian Lloyd, education research consultant. I primarily provide guidance for the measurement of student growth for educator evaluations, but I do a number of other work and projects for the Michigan Department of Education as well. And some of that work is providing information and guidance around the idea of whole child and defining whole child. The work of defining whole child integrates with our ESSA plan, but also provides us an excellent vehicle to implement improvement processes, support MTSS implementation, and improve the outcomes of students and children across our state. A definition of social emotional learning. I'll let you read this definition. Don't want to read it for you. We all can read, and I'll just give a couple minutes for you to allow you to read this definition. I thought skip it today. Because I clicked. Okay, social emotional learning is a process through which individuals learn and recognize and manage emotions. It's an important part of learning as students experience difficulties with their social or emotional components that can cause difficulties with academic learning, and looking at learning through the lens of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's significantly more difficult for children who have difficulties with social or emotional needs to be successful with academic skills because it greatly affects their learning in a number of different ways. So social emotional learning is represented, we have documents, the Michigan Department of Education has documents for that provide components and learning proficiencies. We're swapping out an old PowerPoint deck, and we'll have a new PowerPoint deck open for you in just a second. But that graphic that you had just seen, here we go. That graphic that you had just seen is a definition of the components that Michigan Department of Education has put forth to provide standards for social emotional learning. The work that I talked about before about defining the whole child is represented in this slide. We recently released a definition statement and document to help define whole child for educators across the state of Michigan. And MDE supports the whole child, whole community, the WSCC model, which is a national leading model. This model provides a broad framework that uses that Maslow hierarchy of needs within an ecological systems approach for addressing both academic and non-academic needs. So And this ecological systems approach looks at not just the child within the school, but all of the different systems that affect the child and their ability to experience success within the schools. And so an MDE is going to be providing supports for each of these components to be able to help children be more successful inside and outside the school. Because as research has found that this does have a significant impact on learning. So again, here's that definition we've already read through. There is a link for those of you who have downloaded the PowerPoint. The SEL components and indicators. It's a document that provides learning standards and indices for success at social emotional learning. Social emotional learning is one component of how MDE has defined whole child. It's an important component, but there is many other components to how we have defined whole child. But social emotional learning is, and the success of social emotional learning is critical for student success. So social emotional learning touches improvement processes in a number of different ways. Social emotional learning and difficulties with social emotional learning can often manifest itself in many different ways. It may manifest in behavioral difficulties, which have effect in a lot of different areas and can affect the learning of others. And it may also exacerbate academic difficulties in ways that may be difficult to predict. Sometimes social emotional learning and difficulties with social and emotional functioning is easy to see and easy to recognize, and at times much more difficult. And being able to be proactive and use programming instruction that provide some proactive supports around social emotional learning oftentimes helps improve both behavior and academic outcomes in ways that sometimes aren't even readily apparent until you recognize the benefits of remediating those difficulties before they're found. The first step towards addressing student social emotional issues at the Tier 1 level, the social emotional learning of all of the students within your system, students with Tier 2 level social emotional needs, the students who need some additional supports, and the students who are at the Tier 3 level, students who really need some intensive supports around social emotional functioning, is to correctly identify social emotional issues at all three of these levels. So in order to accurately identify social emotional issues, which sometimes manifest clearly, sometimes manifest in more subtle ways, it requires districts to review data that would allow them to accurately identify when social emotional issues may present and at what tiered level that they present. And the ability to be proactive and invest in social emotional programming and instruction does yield long-term benefits that are more cost-effective than many times if they weren't addressed. There's recent research from 2015 that suggests that each single dollar invested into social emotional programming and instruction yields $11 in long-term benefits. Meta-analysis found social emotional learning programs demonstrated an 11 percentile point gain in academic achievement. And as we're finding student growth becoming more and more important, both in educator evaluations and school improvement and district improvement processes, using programming and instruction that research finds has significant impact on educational outcomes and student growth becomes increasingly important. Once you've identified social emotional needs, and there are measures that would allow you to do that, SRSS and SABRS, so on and so forth. Once you've identified social emotional needs, then what to do about it is also is a pretty important next step. There's an organization called the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning that has done a lot of research around programming and instruction for students with social emotional needs, and programs that are designed to remediate those difficulties and provide proactive supports. We've provided two links here to a series of reviews of programs that are available for social emotional learning. One is a link to elementary school programs, preschool and elementary, and the other is for middle school and high school. And these reviews provide you with research and the effectiveness of these programs to help make informed decisions on what type of programming and instruction yields the best benefits for social emotional outcomes. So in thinking about social emotional learning and culturally responsive teaching, a central theme of importance is the idea of equity. And the picture here that we have is to help differentiate between equality, everybody getting the same thing, and equity, which is everybody getting what they need in order to be successful. So educational equity is when policies, practices, and curricula are responsive to the needs of students, and making sure that we've recognized the needs of both individual students, groups of students, and the differing demographics of students that we have in our schools, to make sure that the lens that we see our world through and the perspectives that we hold may at times be different than the perspectives and worldviews of the students with which we teach. Being able to recognize that and provide and be able to adjust to the worldviews and perspectives and cultural needs of the students within our schools are important to help yield the best outcomes that we can for our students. Culturally responsive educational systems. In order for education systems to be more culturally responsive, 3 specific areas need to be addressed to be able to think through culturally responsive education within our school organization. That includes our leadership, our principals, our central office, and their views regarding diversity and the use of physical space. Then also what plans and procedures do we have in place? What policies and procedures? How are they culturally responsive? And how do they provide equity to our students? And that determines the services delivery for the students of our diverse backgrounds. And then also how we involve our community in relation to how the institution is involved with the community, to include all stakeholders of all of our demographics, and to help build strong relationships with families and communities, especially those who have typically difficulty with education and may be underrepresented with the leadership and the policies and procedures that sometimes get created, and making sure that we involve with those within the community that are stakeholders within those demographics. So thinking through both social emotional learning and the integration of cultural responsiveness, it's important to think through a series of different questions when implementing both social emotional learning and academic policies as well. Do all students have access to quality social emotional learning instruction that is culturally responsive? Do educators utilize social emotional learning instructional materials and academic materials that are representative of all students, particularly historically underrepresented students? Are students' experiences, social and emotional strengths and needs recognized and valued? Are there clear connections made between social emotional learning practices and academic practices, and the student's ability to meaningfully participate in core academic learning. Our authentic educator and family community partnerships cultivated to ensure social emotional activities are culturally relevant. Again, right, making sure that we make those connections within our community to help bring in viewpoints that may be more difficult if you're not from that cultural, if you don't have that cultural lens. And then finally, how will social emotional instruction be monitored to ensure positive outcomes for all students to prevent unintended negative consequence from disproportionately affecting students along racial, ethnic, or economic lines, or based on gender expression or disability. So now we have a time to reflect and respond. So after reflecting on the aspects of social emotional learning in your building or your district, how well do you believe your organization is doing at fully implementing with fidelity within your system improvement evaluation programming work? How well are aspects of social emotional learning being implemented?
Thank you all. I think somehow we lost your responses there for a moment, but it sounds like these are areas that we're considering and still grappling with. But as a state, we're really new to a lot of this refocused emphasis on whole child. So it makes sense that it's a growth area for many of us in their state as we consider how these approaches can ultimately leverage and support our improvement practices and our evaluation practices and our overall health of our school and system to better meet the needs of students. So kudos to you for being off to a good start and for maintaining this in your focus area as an area of continued improvement and growth for your system. Looking ahead now, we get to share some information with you that we think is really interesting. Teachers across Michigan responded to research questions from three research partners, Northern Michigan University, Ray Taylor and Associates, and the Marzano Research Group, all as part of a grant-funded research project to learn about educator evaluation implementation in our state. The full reports are available on our MDE EdEval website, and we'll be sharing that link with you here in a few minutes. But we wanted to highlight a few of the areas as we're talking about feedback and growth and improvement. We wanted to highlight a few of those areas to guide your reflection about the feedback systems that are currently in place in your system, as we, of course, always have our eye on continuous improvement. So we're going to show you a few charts and graphics again. All these, the extended version of all these are available in our full reports, but I want to talk through a few interesting findings. This one here is from Ray Taylor and Associates. This really has to do with the overall effectiveness ratings. In 2015-16 school year, about 42% of Michigan teachers were rated as highly effective and about 56% as effective, with only about 0.5% as ineffective. So again, 98% at the effective or highly effective level. So the teachers that were part of the survey were asked how they felt about those numbers and where they break down if that was appropriate. So the respondents say that the number of teachers rated as minimally effective or ineffective was too small. About 30 to 40% of teachers said that that was too small of a number, that there should be more teachers probably in that area. But the majority of respondents, almost 60%, found that the percentage of teachers in those two categories was about right. So again, we have a little bit of a split perception on that, but about almost 40% of our teachers in our state feel that that number could be higher, whereas a lot of teachers also feel that that's just about right. So all this survey data really focuses on perception data. So we have to take all that into consideration, but we think it's really important to know how teachers and administrators are feeling about this educator evaluation implementation to guide our work to better support and make this as effective as possible. So within our educator evaluation unit, we've used this survey data, but we've also combined it with some published work of authors like Paul Bambrick-Santoyo and Kim Marshall to provide specific strategies to help empower teachers to own their evaluation process with greater understanding and to leverage that district approved and adopted framework to use the evaluation process and the feedback and observation that they receive from their administrator to truly leverage those tools to create a professional growth opportunity to support their professional growth and individual development plans. In this webinar series, we support building and central office administrators in their role as instructional leaders, and we do this by prompting or providing guidance to use coaching and to use high impact feedback strategies in a timely manner as a catalyst to support the professional growth and achievement and progress of those that you supervise, as well as to intersect with your school improvement plans and just to be an effective implementation of educator evaluation processes. Bambrix and Toyo asks us to consider if administrators are able to visit classrooms more frequently, their ability to grow in their understanding of teachers' pedagogy, student learning, and data-driven instruction, all combined with school culture grows, thus driving the area of priority for feedback and school improvement. So as we look at the information on this slide, it's really the same question that was asked for administrators about the percentage of teachers falling in each area of effectiveness. And you can see we have a little bit different perspective here from the administrators. You can see that about 60, I'm looking at the first column there, about 63% of administrators felt the number of teachers in the highly effective category was too high. The number in the effective, 65% felt like it was about right. Almost 60% felt that there should be more teachers in the minimally effective category. And look at the last column there, almost 98% felt that I'm sorry, about 45% said the ineffective category had too few teachers. There probably should be more teachers that end up with that rating, with about 50% of administrators saying that small amount of less than 1% is about right. So this table summarizes some teacher responses regarding the usefulness of feedback. This comes from the Marzano Group Research Project. The shaded cells in the table show that areas that indicate the highest response of agreement for that component. And I realize this might be a little hard to read here, so I'm going to read through some of this for you. The majority of teachers surveyed responded that the feedback from their evaluator included specific improvement suggestions, included specific instructional strategies that could be used to improve teaching, that feedback was provided as frequently as what was needed, and was provided in a timely way for them to use to inform those practices. So we had a high level of agreement around all of those statements. The majority of teachers had to disagree with the following statements, that the feedback included specific suggestions how to improve content knowledge, included specific classroom management strategies, or included recommendations for finding resources or professional development. So in general, teachers' feedback felt like it included more suggestions around specific instructional strategies and was timely and frequent, but didn't include as much about specific classroom management strategies or connecting teachers to more specific to their content or around connecting them with resources. So again, we provide this information again as to share teacher perspective as well as to guide your reflection about your feedback processes. Okay, let's take a look here. Teachers responded with really high levels of agreement. You can see the agree column in all of these statements is the shaded, which again means that it was the highest amount of respondents chose that category. And these areas are in regards to the accuracy of feedback. Teachers felt agreement that the feedback was an accurate portrayal of their teaching. It came from a typical day in their classroom, that the evaluation system that they were using was accurate enough that even if different evaluators came in to see them during that lesson, they would come up with similar evidence. And also that they had general sense of agreement that even if different evaluators were in the room, the same feedback would be given, whether it was looking at the classroom instruction or other evidence sources. So those all had high levels of agreement from our teachers across the state. Let's take a look at this one. This table has to do with the responses to, again, access to resource as part of the feedback cycle. You can see that 3 of these 4 categories or statements had agree as the top level of responses, while 1 had disagree as the top level. About 50% of respondents reported that they agreed or strongly agreed that they had access to professional development and an instructional leader. 45 to about 55% of respondents disagreed or strongly disagreed that they had access to expert teachers modeling strategies and that they had time within their school day to plan for implementation of these new strategies. So one of our strategies that we talk to teachers about when we're talking about how to grab influence and empower them within their evaluation process is the idea of peer observation. So as administrators, we'd like you to consider that idea of structured peer observation as a tool to address both of these areas, the access to expert teachers modeling, as well as time within the school day to plan and learn and work on implementing new strategies. So the next table, again, we're all going through teacher perception of survey data. This is how teachers respond, what they do in response to the feedback that they receive. What do teachers do with that feedback? According to survey results, we had about 59% of teachers said that because of the feedback that they received, they tried new instructional strategies in the classroom. So if we're looking at the agree and strongly agree, about 59% of teachers said they tried a new strategy because of the feedback. I want to look at the next 4 columns, even though the agree was the highest um, rated response for all the statements on this page. I want to look at the second group here, the items 2, 3, 4, and 5 on this page, and I'm going to combine the strongly disagree and disagree column for a second to see that within those we have about a third of our teachers saying that the feedback did not prompt them to try new classroom management strategies, to seek out professional development opportunities, to seek advice from an instructional leader, or to change anything to do with their planning of their instruction. So we have about a third of our teachers responding in this question that they didn't take advantage of some of those opportunities. So we still have a group of our teachers that aren't responding to the feedback in those particular ways. So think about how you might drive some action with your feedback towards some of those different categories that you see teachers responding to or maybe not being as responsive to. Here we have another important slide because it lends insight into what teachers really value within their feedback. We think this is an important one because if we can tailor our feedback to what teachers value in the feedback, we know it's going to be more important and more likely for them to take action on. So some of the items that were very important, that the feedback was received within an appropriate time frame, that included those specific instructional strategies, and that feedback was accurate portrayal of the teaching and came from a typical school day. Those things were really, really important to teachers. Other areas that were listed also as important was that the feedback had specific improvement suggestions. It recommended next steps for finding professional development, that the feedback was frequent, that it came with specific suggestions to how to improve content knowledge, and that it involves specific classroom management strategies as a way to improve teaching and learning. Same table, just a few more questions here for this one. So I know we can't see the labels across the top, but it follows those same scales from unimportant to very of critical importance all the way on the right. I want to point out the last one on here, which was the one that was reported as critical of a critical importance, and that again was the one that having time during the school day to plan for implementing new strategies based on feedback. So teachers are really desirous of having that time. We know time is always such a precious resource in our schools and our systems, but teachers value that time to plan for new implementation of strategies and instructional tools. Um, and we had about 70% of teachers, when we look at the important and very important, the top areas right under critical there for the first three areas, about 70% said that these items were important or very important. Again, having access to professional development, having access to an instructional leader, and being able to observe expert teachers. So again, these slides just really reinforce how important it is to have that strong instructional leader at the building to focus our energy on providing that support for our teachers, but also to not feel that the principal or that the building administrator is the sole person responsible for excellent instructional leadership, but there is a way to bring other teachers and highlight their effective practice by allowing them to model and showcase their strategies for others. So after we've looked at some ideas around the importance of usefulness of feedback and teacher evaluations from teachers in the field, what's one area of feedback that you think you can grow in and weave into your feedback practices? Go ahead and look through these responses and pick the one that you feel is best represents your work. And I think we even have a section there. Question E allows you to pop in your own idea within our chat pod if you have an idea that's not represented on the list. But please take a moment to respond to that question. Please make sure you take a look at the survey results here, and then we also have some answers that I think are going to be popping up in our chat section here. So be sure to review the ideas of your colleagues. Looks like we're a little varied in our responses. We're a few different places here as far as what your areas of focus will be, and that's great because there's many ways to improve our feedback and feedback systems. And it sounds like I see several people responding that the idea of connecting teachers to an expert model is of critical importance there. And I would agree with you there that helping teachers see those strategies in action is a great learning opportunity. Please continue to respond here. I'm going to slide through the next couple of slides here as you're finishing up your responses. So as we talk a little bit, so we gave you some information about teacher and administrator perception, about educator evaluation in our state. We're also going to talk through some barriers and challenges as well as some ways that districts and systems have found success within educator evaluation. So some different barriers were identified through these research projects that help us think about some ways that we can better support our schools and teams. Evaluator time constraints to conduct evaluations, especially within small systems where the evaluator might have a myriad of responsibilities or might be the only evaluator, was identified as a challenge. Sites with frequent turnover also was identified as a barrier. The second barrier here talks about the educator discomfort with identifying challenging goals. A lot of teachers noted that in our survey that although they view the dimensions of the teacher evaluation frameworks as essential instructional practice and welcome the communication that comes from the feedback, some of them experience discomfort with setting annual goals that they would be accountable to. And also the idea of negative perceptions of that constructive feedback can also be a barrier to work around, to be able to deliver that constructive feedback in a way that's also received in a way that can take action. A few more barriers that were identified. At some sites, district and school administrators have discussed the need to be more consistent in the breadth and depth of the written feedback that they provide. So there's some variations in that. Um, some respondents indicated a barrier was the struggle to adapt the educator evaluations for special student populations and different contexts, whether it be EL learners or special education learners. And also, administrators and teachers both indicated that they were uncertain about their approaches to integrate student growth into educator evaluations, and that was a challenge that they were still working through. So this slide here talks about the same idea, which barriers were rated as most significant by different stakeholder groups. You can see that time is one of the top barriers for the teachers, the administrators as evaluators, and the administrators as evaluatees. So finding time to complete these requirements is a challenge for all stakeholder groups, as well as you can see some different barriers that are also identified by different stakeholder groups there. So we know there's barriers to these things within the legislation and within implementation. So how do we work through those, and what successes and what catalysts have districts and teams found that help support their work? So the number one identified success and catalyst from our case study report was a phased approach to implementation, adopting a subset of components of the teacher evaluation framework, or increasing the number and frequency of classroom evaluations over time helped teachers understand the dimensions of the evaluation framework better. Another catalyst was the involvement of key administrators and teachers in the training. So not maintaining that vendor training just for the administrators, but bringing in more stakeholders into the fold on training opportunities. And also the ongoing school meetings to continue to review and discuss educator evaluation systems and the components. So it's that ongoing piece that helped to move those groups and districts forward. We have a few more here, successes. The fourth one there, highly engaged stakeholders all the way from board members, administrators, and instructional coaches. Having all those people on board was identified as a catalyst to have educator evaluation be a consideration for their work as well. And ultimately, I think this is listed as number 5, but might be the highest leverage point of this entire enterprise of educator evaluation, is to develop a shared definition and expectation for high quality instruction. The teacher, school administrator, and district administrator evaluation processes create opportunities to develop these shared definitions of what is excellent teaching and leadership. It helps you to identify district and school priorities, target professional growth and supports that are needed, as well as analyze student academic growth and outcome evidence. Teaching becomes more transparent and intentional when all these stakeholders, the board members, the administrators, the instructional staff, and teachers discuss and reflect on the elements of high quality and innovative instruction, educational leadership, and the meaningful use of school and student data. So we're going to talk through a few more ideas of how to incorporate data within your continuous improvement cycle as we wrap up the last section of our webinar.
Thanks, Joe. So our next section is going to be on teacher observation requirements and the use of data to drive continuous improvement cycles. 380-1249, the educator evaluation legislation, lays out specific requirements for teacher observations. At least 2 observations are required per year unless the teacher is effective or highly effective for the two most recent evaluations. At least 1 observation must be unscheduled. At least 1 classroom observation must be conducted by the administrator or designee responsible for the teacher's annual and year evaluation. That does mean that observations may be done by other than the administrator or designee. That's the important flip side of that bullet point. Feedback needs to be provided within 30 days of the observation, and minimally include a review of the lesson plan, content standard, and student engagement within the instruction. One of the 4 labels that is assigned to applicable teachers administrators based on student growth, observation tool, and additional factors. Those labels, of course, are highly effective, effective, minimally effective, and ineffective. And performance goals and related training for the following school year jointly developed. The most important aspect for continuous improvement that comes out of educator evaluations is the dialogue and the conversation focused around data and how to improve between the evaluator, the administrator, and the teacher. So the facilitation of that communication and specific ways for teachers to improve is critically important. So we're now going to engage in a reflect and respond opportunity. I'd like everybody to read the quote by Jeffrey Pfeffer, and I'll let you read the quote, and then after you read the quote, respond to what new initiatives or programming are you preparing for, and how are you working in collaboration with your staff to prepare them for success? And thinking through all of the content for today: social emotional learning, continuous improvement for school improvement, or for school and district improvement, and how you integrate educator evaluations in light of this quote. And I'll allow you to read and respond. So it looks like some very thoughtful responses are coming in, and I'm seeing a lot of using professional learning to guide improvement processes and to guide the improvement of teacher and student outcomes. So that seems to be a fairly common theme across our participants here. I'll leave the chat up, and for the sake of time, move through a little bit more of our content to allow people to continue to respond and still facilitate new learning. One of the comments spoke a little bit about student growth and leading teachers through student growth within educator evaluations, and this slide describes how the composition of student growth is changing beginning with the 2018-19 school year. As I'm sure all of you are aware, the teacher framework data will be make up 60%. It was 70%, 75% over the past 3 years, and this year it'll be 60%. And student growth will be 40% of summative ratings, with 20%, half of that 50% being data that's local to the LEA, and half of that being state assessment data for tested grades and subjects, which MDE recommends to be grades 4 through 8 in ELA and math. For non-tested grades and subjects, that 40% would entirely be comprised of student growth or data that is local to the LEA, student growth data that is local to the LEA. So looking through the student growth requirements within our legislation, 380-1249, 3 years of data should be used when available, must be used when available. We, of course, are moving to 40% student growth, and state assessments data must be used, state assessment student growth must be used for tested grades and subjects, grades ELA and math, in grades 4 through 8. Beginning with 2018-19. As part of those research studies that Joe was discussing earlier in our webinar, a question got asked in one of the research studies, what model or what assessments are being used for measurement of student growth, and it's helpful to know what other districts across the state are doing. 22% said they use NWA, 19% say they use pre-post tests, and you can see what other data is being used. And data sets are changing as measurement of student growth becomes more prominent within educator evaluations, and student growth receives additional attention. Within the legislation, they define that data that's local to the LEA is multiple measures, and multiple measures need to be used to determine student growth ratings. And these multiple measures are defined within the legislation as research-based growth measures, alternative assessments that are rigorous and comparable across schools, nationally normed or locally adopted assessments that are aligned to state standards, student learning objectives, which we've provided a lot of guidance for, and achievement of individualized education or IEP goals. We provide a lot of research or a lot of resources around the measurement of student growth, and as we provide presentations to ed ISDs across the state of Michigan and within our student growth workshops, typically one of the benefits of attendees is simply knowing about and being able to view and use the resources that MDE has developed over the course of the last year and a half. And if you go to the website, www.michigan.gov/MDE-edevals, you will see a number of different resources that are available that educators across the state have found very helpful. And some of these resources are listed specifically here with links that allow you to go directly to those overview guidance, guidance that's specific to student learning objectives, a student growth calculator tool that allows you to determine student growth ratings using the data local to the LEA, that is using pre and post test model to be able to determine those student growth ratings, and then a student growth calculator tool that will provide student growth ratings for state assessment, and that calculator tool can be downloaded from here as well. There will also be an EVA student growth model that should be available come 2018-19, and more detail will be provided for that. That will be an optional model that could be used for measurement of student growth for state assessment. We are planning on again doing another student growth workshop and providing again a 3-day workshop that we provided earlier this year was very successful, and we received a lot of very positive feedback around from participants of the student growth workshop. And if you'd like to registration for the student growth workshop, in which we walk district teams through the developing local practices and policies allow district teams time. It's about 50% content delivery and 50% team time to be able to work with teacher leaders, building administrators, and central office staff to build your own system that works for your district, while getting some expert guidance and being able to make the best decisions for your teachers and for your administrators. It's been found to be very, very helpful. And we're planning on this workshop to take place July 24th through the 26th. This link provides you with an access to be able to get registered, to get your team, register your district team. We also have had some discussions about the possibility of doing workshops again during the 2018-19 school year, but that possibility is going to be determined based on need and communicated need from the field. So if this is a ongoing need for districts, then the more in need that you indicate to MDE, the more likely chance that we will provide workshops again during the 2018-19 school year. Here are a listing of the sources that we use for the development of this content, and importantly, the link to receive sketch credit. So if you click on that link, take the survey, you will need to take the survey in order to get sketch credit. So I highly encourage, if you're interested in receiving sketch credit for attending these webinars, to click that link and complete the survey. And thank you very much for attending and participating. And I see a feedback that the link does not appear to work. Let's see, Marty Snitchin, who's providing assistance. There is also.
Yes, the link is also there where it says feedback survey. We have a couple links actually that pop. End of session survey and student growth workshops link is there. So if you click on those, it should take you directly to the site.
So that does work. Okay. Yeah. So again, that was Marty Snitchin who just voiced in that the end of session survey. If the link on the PowerPoint that's shown does not work, the end of session survey in the bottom right-hand corner should work. And so if you click on that link, that will allow you to enter or complete the survey and to receive the sketch credit. So as you are filling out the survey, and we do look at that feedback and use that feedback to help inform future sessions. I really want to send some appreciation out to all of you who have attended many of these sessions, and your feedback is critically important and really does inform our work. And I really appreciate your participation and your engagement in the work that we're doing, and wish you the best of luck and for the end of your school year and for your planning for the next school year. Thanks again.